hard-hitting news. Alternative talk radio. Get ready, America, for Deadline Live with your host, Jack Blood. Deadline Live is a daily wrap-up for those too busy in the daily grind to discern and dissect the news. While the so-called mainstream media buries the truth, Jack Blood uncovers it, exposing the lies that our trusted government officials do not want us to know. And now, please welcome Jack Blood.
Exposing the lies, the tyranny, and the truth that your trusted government officials and their gatekeepers do not want you to know about. Welcome to this live original edition of Deadline Live. It is the 16th day of April, 2009. We have a breaking news story. Last night I was called by loose change Dylan Avery. Said that he had some new information on the Barry Jennings case. If you don't remember who Barry Jennings was, he was the emergency coordinator for the New York Housing Authority in New York City. He passed away last August 2008 under very, I think, unusual and particular circumstances. There was actually no disclosure of the circumstances of Barry Jennings, who was 53 years old at the time. He was maybe one of the more credible witnesses to what happened at the World Trade Center and the World Trade Center Building 7 on that fateful day of 9/11, 2001. He was witness to the bombs going off, witness to all kinds of things he probably wasn't supposed to see and definitely wasn't supposed to talk about regarding Building 7. And he did pass away just a few days before the NIST report came out on Building 7, of course, with the cover story that it was the only skyscraper ever in history, before or since, to fall from office fires. Something a lot of us have a very hard time believing and accepting. A freak accident, according to NIST. So Barry Jennings was very important. We all were very not only concerned for him, for his family, but for the truth as well. So this was a very important story, and we're going to update that with you.
On the program with us right now, the one and only Dylan Avery. He is the originator of loose change, which caused its own revolution. I know that's a big word now, and a lot of people are using it. It all began with loose change and 9/11 truth, and this came and really created something very special, and I think we're seeing the results of that today. Dylan Avery is on the line with us. Dylan, thanks for being on the show today.
Jack, thank you very much for having me back on the show. I guess if anything, I don't want to take credit for creating the truth movement, because I mean, if anything, I just kind of took what already existed and just kind of gave my own contribution to it. I appreciate it though, for sure. Thank you very much. I guess I just, there's a lot of hardworking people in the movement that are really busting their rump to make sure things get done, and I don't want to take anything away from them. That's really the only thing.
Dylan, Barry Jennings died, and I believe it was last September when I had you on the show. We talked about that briefly. We really didn't know too much about it and the circumstances of his death. Of course, he was really a huge piece of this 9/11 truth puzzle. He was ultimately maybe one of the grandest whistleblowers we had, though maybe even he himself didn't know about it. If you could just very briefly, for my listeners, tell them who Barry Jennings was and why his testimony, his eyewitness report, was so important.
Yeah. Wow. All right. Well, Barry Jennings was one of the two people that testified to a explosion happening inside World Trade Center Building 7 on September 11th. According to Barry's own testimony to us, this explosion occurred before either of the Twin Towers had fallen. He was very explicit about this, and also stated that he also heard many other explosions happening while he was trapped in the building, because the explosion trapped him and the other individual, who I'll get to in a minute. They were trapped in there for several hours, and Barry witnessed firefighters running away 2 times and coming back a 3rd time, which was in response to both of the collapses. And he was very explicit about these details, because I made sure to we were very pressed for time during our interview with him, so I was trying to get information out of him, but also try to not hold him up too much. It was a tough balance. Barry's very important, and I mean, it's not even necessarily in terms of how important he is to the movement. It's, I mean, also in terms of the fact that he was an amazing guy. I only got to know him briefly, but I mean, he was really cool. Jason and I sat in his office and we got to talk to him for a while. He knew about Second Edition. His coworkers had actually brought him in a copy of it. And a couple of his coworkers actually knew who Jason and I were. They'd heard of Second Edition. So Barry knew who we were going into the interview, and he knew what our position was. He may not have necessarily known the implications of what he was going to say, or how big it was going to go. But I mean, we got a 20-minute unedited, uncut, I would like to think, unguided interview from him. All I tried to do with Barry was just get his testimony and get it in his own words. I wasn't trying to force him down one particular narrative. I was just trying to get things cleared up.
And let me just say this, Dylan. Barry Jennings, for those of you who don't know, he was an eyewitness who was an emergency coordinator for the New York Housing Authority. He had passed away at age 53 here again just recently, and a lot of us were wanting to know why. Barry Jennings was a key 9/11 witness. He was an emergency coordinator for the New York Housing Authority. He passed away recently. There was some really kind of suspicious. There was a really suspicious air about what had happened to him. There was almost no information coming forward about what had happened to him. He had talked to you guys and had reiterated this exclusive interview. His confusion for the explanation of the World Trade Center 7 collapse. He had heard explosions inside the building, Dylan. He was confused about how this went down in the first place. And here he is, an eyewitness in World Trade Center 7, the biggest mystery, I think, really in my own mind about what happened on 9/11. And he met an unfortunate end. We didn't know what happened to him, and we're going to update people, but I really kind of want to build the case here. Who was Barry Jennings, and why was his testimony so important to 9/11 truth?
As I hope it would be pretty clear that Barry's testimony is very important in regards to the record of what happened inside that building, Building 7 that day, because there is very little to work upon. And the other aspect of his interview that I think is probably the most contentious, especially because the BBC seized upon it, was almost, I don't want to say a throwaway remark on his end, but it was definitely something that I'm not really sure why he said it, but he definitely said it. The firefighter, when he took us down, he told us, "Do not look down," and he gestures with his hand. We were stepping over people, and you can feel when you're stepping over people. This is something that, again, he had never been reported before. There were supposedly no casualties inside World Trade Center Building 7. So for Barry to tell us that was interesting. And, I mean, I guess in hindsight, maybe I should have stopped him right there and tried to get him to elaborate. But, I didn't want to interrupt him. I wanted to just let him tell his story. But that's, I think, one of the things about his interview that I don't want to say anything like got him in, necessarily like got him in trouble, but I think that's one of the things about his interview. I mean, like the fact that the BBC seized upon it and then went and interviewed Barry. That's, I guess, the other thing I should segue for your viewers is that after Barry gave us our interview, Jason and I leaked out like 30 seconds or so, and we try to keep all personal details and all of the identifying information out of it, just to be like, hey, this is what we have, this is what we're sitting on. We can't say too much, but we just want everyone to know that we have this. But of course, people figured out who he was, and I called him.
Well, it was leaked. It was leaked by 9/11 truthers who had access to, privileged information. You guys did a good job putting him in a silhouette, trying to protect his identity, but it was a big story, and eventually it came out.
And a lot of the bloggers that were like, "Oh, I mean, that's totally Barry Jennings," et cetera, et cetera. Like they didn't understand the severity of the situation. You know what I'm saying? Like, and again, I understand that. People were excited, they were anxious, I can understand that. But then again, we probably just shouldn't have said anything at all. But with that being said, after, and again, I take my share of the responsibility too. I'm not blame shifting here. I mean, like I said, maybe it shouldn't have been leaked at all. Maybe we should have kept our mouth shut until release, but I guess we felt that we were trying to keep Barry and ourselves safe.
Well, he wanted to talk to you, and I think that's important for our listeners to know. He wanted to talk to you. He felt compelled to share the information, his eyewitness report from Building 7 that day as basically a FEMA operative. And I'm sure, if it was me, couldn't sleep at night without telling somebody exactly what had happened. And that's what he said, that he had heard explosions going off in Building 7, that he was stepping on dead bodies when the mainstream media was reporting there were no bodies in Building 7, other than, I guess, the wreckage of the American Republic. So he was a very important whistleblower. And just to kind of build our case here, Dylan, what kind of a guy was he? What kind of sense did you get from him when you talked to him? I mean, he's gone now, and I hope he can rest in peace. And of course, we are really, I want to be empathetic and compassionate to the family, because there's a good chance he might have met his end by speaking the truth. But what did you get from him? What kind of a guy was he, and why did you feel he wanted to talk about 9/11 so much?